Hey, chat. Oh, I may have lied about your face being on right away because my computer just decided to change things. Thanks, computer. Sneak peek, chat. Spoiler alert. And other similar things. You saw the face for 3 seconds of what you're about to enjoy for the next however long it takes. Couple hours. We'll see. TBD.
A million years.
But welcome to another stream. Yes, it's Wednesday. Yes, it's a real good stream, because of course it's Real Good Wednesday. It's always Real Good Wednesday, and you're crazy for thinking that it was ever on Thursday in the past. My name is Bob. If you don't know me, why the hell are you here? If you do know me, you know that I'm married to my wife, Mandy. And if you know both of us, hopefully you know that Real Good AI is a 501c3 nonprofit that is devoted to fixing AI through good science and ethical science. It's a lot of science. There's science involved. Today's very sciencey. We just did a big event. I just streamed a whole bunch, as did Craig and Mandy and a bunch of other streamers who we're very grateful to, during the Full Steam Ahead thing. So you may have seen people talking about Full Steam Ahead. That was us. That was Real Good AI. I'm not gaslighting you. You're gaslighting you. And thank you to everyone who participated. Thank you to all of you who donated. And what you donated to was this organization. We don't have a guest today. Sometimes we have guests on these streams. Last time we did one, actually last week, was a team stream, and Mandy and I weren't even there because we were moving. If you've watched me stream before, you may realize this is not the room I used to be in. This is a new room. This is the first stream from the new room. So I'm sure everything's working perfectly, and nothing happened that is bad. But Mandy and I were moving last week, but the week before that we had Wade on here. Saw that. That was fun. But the guest this week is someone who's kind of just always here, because it's Mandy. If you didn't know, Mandy's a genius. She knows lots of things about lots of stuff, and especially and specifically, she knows a ton of things about Gaussian processes. So if you're interested in science, AI, math stuff, it's your lucky day, because Mandy's about to give you the best and probably onlyest lecture you will ever have heard about Gaussian processes. Unless you're like a statistician, then there's a good chance that you've heard about these things before. But here,
I mean, not necessarily. I know plenty of statisticians who don't know about these.
It does happen. It seems to happen anyway.
It does.
But yeah, Mandy's actually a genius, chat. Mandy's incredibly smart. If you have questions, I will be playing the role of you, an idiot. So I will be here hosting and or talking to Mandy, asking questions. If you have any questions, I'm going to watch chat. What is a Gaussian process? I think she's going to address that one. That sounds like an early win. But yeah, I don't know. This is always I'm like leading into like, all right, now tell us about yourself. I feel like
I'm a little big. Could I be smaller?
oh, this isn't even your full size.
Oh.
Do you want to see the scene I was going to let your lecture take place in? This is the amount of Mandy we were about to have for most of the stream. It's about you. You're in the place where video games usually is, which is a place of honor on these streams.
Ridiculous, but what about my slides?
Oh yeah, you're right. I probably should do that. There's your slides. I suppose I could like put your face in a more reasonable location. Like boring. Whatever. That's not Mandy's face. All right, hang on. Why are you like this? Why can't we have nice things, computer?
Thank you. I also love my new green office. It was already like this, if you can believe it. I didn't have to change it, so it's really cool.
A very beautiful
Do
office.
that for me.
And she has a piano behind her. And later she's gonna play for us.
I am not.
Oh, okay. I just thought I'd throw that out there. Is there a place where you would prefer yourself to be? Like upper corner, lower corner?
It does not matter. Somewhere out of the way.
I'm gonna put you up here because you are on top of the ivory tower, and I'm gonna put me down below. Where is me? There's me.
We still might block stuff. Like, I might block stuff. I don't know.
I can turn me off if I block too much, but I feel like we need to see Mandy's face. Anyway, here you go, chat.
Probably.
If you're interested, this is the interesting part. Oh, and if you don't actually know Mandy, she is the executive director of Real Good AI. She has a PhD in statistics. She worked at a national laboratory. She has done extensive research into all kinds of really cool science stuff, and her expertise is in statistics and especially in Gaussian processes, which she's going to talk about today. But she knows lots of things about lots of stuff. If you have a question about math or statistics,
true.
she could probably answer it, and she could probably answer it better than
mean,
anyone you could find anywhere else.
I mean, thank you. You're lying to people, but yes,
I think that's
do
true.
love math. And just to prove it, so some people have swear jars. I'm allowed to swear, other than around the baby. We're trying not to do that. Blah blah blah.
What a loser.
But uh, I have a GP jar because I actually have so many ideas and talk about GPs, Gaussian process models, so often that I have to pay the jar because I get on everyone's nerves. But I really do think that Gaussian process models are the future of machine learning. They solve so many of the problems that we're having to deal with them. And so I'm really excited to give people a deeper dive than I think we've ever done on this channel. Now, usually these sort of models, um, sorry, this sort of lecture I've given in the past just like dozens of times to people who are getting PhDs. So I apologize in advance because it is a high level, but we're going to try and break it down. There's not that much on the slides. We'll ignore the math when we see it if it looks scary. Okay, so just close your eyes, pretend it's Halloween. There's no math, but I'll hopefully be able to tell you the shortcuts to these things, because actually a lot of the textbooks on Gaussian process models particularly, they have so much math. I mean, like, even when I read them, I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? And then it's something very simple. It's one of those things. I actually think a lot of statistics is like this, where there's so much like equations and shit they throw at you, but really the truth is something like simple, like there's a mean and there's a variance and we do something about that. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So feel free to ask questions the whole time. Bob will be interjecting. This cannot be a lecture, this can be like a conversation, and I'm happy to do that. So I do want to mention that the materials I developed for this project today actually were developed while I was at Lawrence Livermore National Lab, the Lawrence Livermore National Lab, or whatever Mark said. And so it was released from there. I'm allowed to talk about it, but I just wanted to give them credit because they funded this, and I gave this to students. I actually ran the summer science program, data science program, for a couple years, and I gave this lecture to them several times because it's such an interesting topic. And really, there are so many machine learning people getting machine learning degrees who like totally gloss over Gaussian processes because they're not computationally feasible for large data, but they totally miss the idea that, maybe do something smart and make it computationally feasible, and then the rest of it works out so much better. Okay, we'll talk about it. Okay, so where we're going to start is talk about like statistics in general, and you can ignore the things on this slide, but just look at the picture, right? So we have all this data, and we're trying to like make the best fit for that data so that we could know where there's not a point, where the best estimate is of that point. And everything in machine learning breaks down to one of these sort of problems where it's a regression, where it's, we're drawing a line somehow. And I know that sounds crazy because ChatGPT like talks to you, but it's drawing lines too. And we don't need to work into the details, but everything in machine learning generally boils down to drawing a line between points somehow, right? And so here's like a basic line we're drawing, right? So as one variable goes up, the other one goes up. And so we have this red line that is very well suited through it. And so there's a few features about this that like it has to be true, right? There has to actually be a line there's like points around that line, and you could like draw things around that point so that it doesn't go whoop, it goes ooh. Okay. And each point is its individual thing, right? It doesn't have anything to do with the other points. They're all individual. Now, these are assumptions that we make, and they teach you how to draw these lines in like high school, probably. But it, it the getting these scenarios is impossible. And so, like in machine learning, we don't usually have something like this. What if we have something that looks like this? Now, you see, this isn't nice like the other one. There's this whoopie doop. You see the squiggly do? Yeah?
Uh huh.
Yeah?
Uh huh.
Squiggly? Okay. Yeah, yeah. So that line, it kind of works, but it's not really the best line that we could draw because we want to draw through this swoopy doop, right? Gaussian process models will help you do that. There's lots of other things you could do first, right? So there are other things you could think of. Neural networks are, for example, not a good opportunity here because you don't really have that much data. Keep in mind, neural networks are so data hungry, and we're trying to avoid doing that. Gaussian process models are really the best choice. And I'll say this a few times, but they're what we call the best linear unbiased estimator, which basically means if the assumptions of your Gaussian process model are true, you can't beat it. You literally can't beat it. And so here's an example of me fitting a GP through this model. Yay, it does the swoopy doop, right? Okay. Everybody happy with the swoopy doops? All we're doing is trying to draw a line. That's what we're always trying to do in math. Is that cool? We
Oh
cool
yeah.
with that?
Blue
Yeah,
line
yeah.
good,
And
red line boring,
red line less good, right? Red
red
line
line
is like
garbage.
typical statistics, and blue line is fancy. It's they call it data driven because you don't actually have to know what shape that swoopy doop is before you fit it. You get to know the data tells you what that swoopy doop is, which is what makes Gaussian process models so effective. Now, I'm going to say the formal definition here, but no one gets scared. It's a generalization of the normal distribution where any data that's jointly collected is multivariate normal. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's break that down. Everyone has probably seen a bell curve, right? Have you all seen this? Where it's like symmetrical and it just like things that are really low are not very often, and then there's like a lot around the middle, and then there's not very many that are really high. Think like IQ distribution or some other statistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a mean. That middle area is focused on some number, and then the how wide that thing is its variance. It could be really flat and really far, or it could be really peaky and really short. That's called the variance. So that is a univariate normal distribution. Basically, all this means is that any point, so if I have a region, like I have this box, any point that I put in this box would have some normal distribution with each other. And so there's lots of technical definition, and like there's like a whole formula and whatnot for what that means. You don't need to know any of that. What you need is that I need two things to be able to model this, to be able to fully specify it. I need a mean, where to put that middle of that bell curve, and how wide to make it, right? Those are the two things I need. So no matter where I put the red point in here, I could always draw a line to where that should be. Okay. Does this make
Sure.
sense how we went from two, this is one dimension and this is two dimensions. So the red one, there's going to be values at each of these black dots, but I can make a value at the new red dot no
Mm-hmm.
matter how many dimensions I'm in. Does that make sense? Yes? Chat with me. So we need those two parts of the model, and we're always going to be able to draw a line to any new red dot, and that's why this is really important. So a neural network does this, but it doesn't use distributions. It tries to use like super flexible functions and do so many of them that it sort of starts to approximate the shape. we're building things in. And so the way that a Gaussian process model works, the variance of a value. So this middle red dot, you notice how it's really close to that one dot, and it's kind of close to a few others, but some of them are really far away, right? If I was to try and guess what that red value was, I would probably look at the ones closest to it and try and use that information, and use the information from the ones further away from it less. A way to think about this is like on this curvy do, this line is close to all the points that are very close to it, but the points that are very far away from it on the line, so like at the ends, that those values aren't really used that much. You want the local information. That's essentially what we're building into the Gaussian process model. And we're going to define exactly how much that and in what way that closeness matters. Things that are close are more important, things that are farther away, less important. And that's how we're able to get these like shapes. Any questions before we move on? So the higher it is, the more certain we are the information we're looking at. The higher what is? The closer it is, the more certain we are. But we also need to know about how those things are related.
Is the concern with implementing GPs in machine learning the time complexity?
It's usually the memory complexity, although time complexity is also a thing. I'll show you the function and we can talk about. Okay, so this is the scary one. And so I won't talk about this too much, but since we're talking about complexity, this is the formula that we put things into. So I told you there's a covariance, which is this k, and there's a mean, which is the mu. So those are the two things that make it really specific. Remember, those are where that bell curve is and how wide it is, essentially. Okay, and we don't need to look at these other things. There's like pies and there's whatever other things. The y is the data. And log likelihood is this thing that we're trying to work on. This is here in case you actually want to compute this. This thing at the bottom is very helpful for that if you actually need to do that. We don't need to look at the formulas. But the point is that that covariance matrix keeps showing up in here. So this K matrix is computed as its dimensions, number of observations you have in your data by number of observations that you have in your data. So if you have like 20 points, so if that uh, line that we were drawing through things was there were 20 black dots, this would be a 20 by 20 thing, which means 20 by 20 is 400 numbers I would have to store. Now, that's already a lot of numbers, but if you're talking 10,000 by 10,000, you're already talking about exceeding the memory of your laptop. And 10,000 data points, as you can imagine, for machine learning is not a lot of data. It's very small data. And so that is the main thing that why people don't use these Gaussian process models, is because that having to form that matrix and invert it and do operations on it is too expensive. I have done some research and I feel very satisfied that we have addressed this problem, at least in one way. What does the trace do? The trace is just a way to compute it. I mean, it's a it means you take the diagonal values. That is linear algebra we don't really want to talk about at the moment. Okay, so everything in this model is just formulas, right? So once we have the formula for how we're doing it, it's obvious what the best distribution is for the mean and the prediction. So what I don't want you to focus on all the crap on this page. What I do want you to focus on is that when I get an estimate from this model, unlike a neural network where it just gives you a prediction and it throws that out there, I get both for free, a prediction and an uncertainty estimate of how far off that value is. This is hugely important. So I don't just get that curvy line, although I was showing you that curvy line. It also would give you how far off we think we are from estimating that curvy line beautifully. And that is hugely important to interpretability in machine learning. Now, the other thing which is really buried here, and I'm sorry because this is a very technical detail, but in this prediction equation, ignore all the rest of this crap, but this is the data. This turns into a vector that multiplies times that data. Essentially, I'm weighting all the data to be such that data being close is more relevant. It means it contributes more, and things that are really far away are downvoted, so they're barely involved. And that's what this kernel matrix does. It determines that weighting of how we weight things. Now, a good example to this would be, if you take a mean, right? You take a straight average of everything. You add everything up and you divide by however many you added, right? It's exactly like that, except some of them get extra. You put them in extra times in that raffle, if you will.
Hmm.
So like the ones you think are really important, you put them in more times, and the ones you think are really not relevant, you make go away. And that's essentially what this math is exactly doing. So you can trace when you get a prediction, you can say, hey, look, I got this because it was 20% this data point and 40% this data point and 15% this data point. Like you can trace exactly where that information came from your training data. And that's one of the things I find really cool about it, both this variance and the interpretability that you can say that. Any questions?
I guess this is not really relevant to what you're talking about, but just as like a context thing, um, if you were to, if this is probably going to be wrong, but if I was going to compare this to like how current popular AI stuff works, like how LLMs work, whatever, that point is crucially important because if you were talking to a chatbot, the chatbot could tell you what training data it gave you a response from. Is sort of is that the same? Is that connecting, or am I just making that connection up?
Can you ask him again? I'm sorry, I was
Well,
being a
like
bad
a
host
big
during
thing.
Twitch chat.
No, you're good. A big thing that we talk about is like chatbots, LLMs have no way to tell you, or other generative AI has no way to tell you, like, I drew from this book, I pulled from this article. There's no
Hmm.
attribution, right? Is this
Hmm.
tracing? Is that what would theoretically allow a chatbot powered by Gaussian processes as opposed to powered by a neural network machine learning stuff?
Yes, yes, that is
To so like if you use a Gaussian process image generator, it would give you
mhm.
some image, whatever the output was, but it would say I used this piece from this artist for 20%. I use This is like a huge connection that I feel like if you're an artist or creative or a writer or whatever, this is like one of the big concerns, and this is one of
Right,
the big differences, right, that GPs
right.
offers in
And
this
this
on
is
the back end.
complicated math, but I do want to stress this is not a black box. I can trace exactly what computations gave me answers. Right. And
As
that gives me a
compared
whole
to
hell of a lot of control to know where, because neural networks, they go through these layers and there's like so many functions acting in such crazy ways that you have no idea why it gives you the thing that it gave you. But this, I can tell you exactly what data things came from, exactly why it's behaving the way that it is. And it's saying, so here it'll tell you like when things are really far away, for example, from things that it has seen before, because it will tell you that it's uncertain about the solution
Yeah, so
in
this
this
ties back to
prediction
that
here.
too, right? If you're talking to a chatbot
Yeah.
and you say, "Tell me information about this animal or whatever," current chatbots will just say, "Oh yeah, elephants are really small and they're blue and they live in the ocean and blah," and they have no way to tell you how confident they are in whatever they just told you, but that something
Right.
using this as the mathematical underpinning would be able to say like, I don't really know if this is true, but here's an
Hmm.
answer. You know, I'm not very confident. Just to connect that back to what people like the actual things your chat probably interfacing with that are AI in your daily lives. But
Hmm.
sorry, I know that's not
Now,
really
I
what you're
don't want
talking
to
about.
overplay it because obviously, if these were perfect, everyone would have already implemented them. There are these computational and like restrictive problems that we are working on, but we think it's worth a try because obviously this solves so many of the issues that people have with current AI. Um, yeah.
Not to belabor it, but this would also be a way that you could solve the issue of a lot of current AIs. They try and put guardrails on them, right? And they try and say like, well, this it won't tell you how to do anything dangerous or illegal, or it won't generate images of real famous figures, but they don't know how it's generating these things, so they can't really
Hmm.
tell it not to do it. There's a workaround, right?
Right.
There are tricks you can do to trick chatbots into breaking their own rules, no matter how much of a huge brick wall they think they're putting. Anyway, this is belaboring the point, but this is one of the parts I think is really interesting about what your approach is and like what GPs can do. That's a huge distinction, huge important
Okay.
distinction theoretically. But go on.
So the main goal, so Gaussian process models, as you can see, most of this formula relates to these Ks, right? You see a lot of Ks here. If you just look, you're like Ks. Okay, so the covariance is very important, and oftentimes people will just ignore that mean, which is where you put that central like bell curve function. Okay, so people like to ignore this and then they get mad when it doesn't work right. Okay, so I'm telling you, over here on the left is if you just ignore it, you say that the mean is zero because you don't want to deal with it, right? So that's a very common thing, and it makes some terms go away and makes things easier. Then the black points here, I'm trying to predict there at the middle, and with different covariance values, I get those different dots. So I could be like horribly down here, even though none of the data belonged down there, right? So if they're very silly, it could just give you like basic nonsense from your model. If you do here on the right, if you have just like you add up all the data and you make it the average, and that is your mean function you put into the Gaussian process model, like you feel like you should. There's this very small spread of where it thinks that point actually could be. And so, uh, not only does this give you like very tight uncertainty quantification where you're like, yes, I know it exactly here. This one on the left doesn't even get to remotely the right place as it does on the right. So, uh, to anyone actually thinking about fitting these in practice, do not ignore your main function. It can be something simple like an average, but if you just forget it completely, you're going to dive off a cliff potentially. So, just
Someone
getting
said
that
I
put
should
out there.
talk about this on Distractable. I think there's a reason Mandy's doing a lot of the talking here, and I'm just asking questions. I don't think I
Yeah,
could
Bob,
talk about.
give a talk on GPs. I mean,
Oh,
Bob's
sure.
probably heard me talk about GPs enough. If I gave you these slides, you could probably talk about some of it.
It'd be so wrong. Oh my god. That would be a
Oh
funny episode
yeah.
idea. You give us some slides, and then we have to give a lecture on what we think the slides are about. And then Mandy
But
can
like
tell me
no
how
words,
stupid we
just
are.
plots, just plots.
Yeah. No, minimal explanation, just slides that are about some topic with like maybe some short phrases, and then yeah, we just there's a lot of
You got your G's and you
look
got your P's.
look at these dots. Look how cool these
That's
dots
right.
are.
Yeah.
You see how they go
Yeah.
down
Look
and
at
then
these dots.
up and then really down? Look at that.
So okay, so this one I'm going to tell you, neural networks are not good at telling when they're extrapolating, right? So interpolation means here I've got all these uh, open points. are the data that I have, and I'm trying to do a point in between. That's called interpolation. Now, here I have all these open points on one side, and I'm going outside of the range in which I have data. That's called extrapolation. And extrapolation is bad no matter what model you have, unless you have like a physics model that has been tested. I mean, even if it hasn't been tested in a range, like extrapolation is a hard freaking problem no matter where you slice it. And yes, those things are better, but if you use like a physics model or something. But if you use a neural network, a Gaussian process model, a regression, a polynomial, whatever you want to use, it's always a risk if you're looking outside of where you have data. And um, so GPS, this is another thing that happens. If you set your mean to be something and you got no other information there, like I tell you, I have no information at this new area, what value would you guess it as? You would always guess it as the mean, right? Because you have got no other guess, right? Everything is going to return to whatever you set the mean at. And so here it's diving off this cliff because we've also made that mistake again where we're setting the mean to be 0. It will converge to whatever that mean is, and the uncertainty will be huge because it doesn't know, but its best guess is going to be what you told it the middle of the distribution is going to be, because that's always an easy thing to do. So when you hear people talking about, this is why we can't do things like the stock market, for example, with Gaussian process models or machine learning or those other sort of things, because we're always trying to look into the future where we haven't seen any data yet. And so it's always extrapolating, which is a really hard problem for all of these models. Now, they all like to do like tricks where they're like doing periodicity and time, blah, blah, blah. Like in December's, it always goes up or whatever, you know, but like going into the future, it's very hard to predict. And so this is that same idea where I have data in one part and there's another part where I'm trying to move to. That's called extrapolation. Very hard to do, even with Gaussian process models. What we want to use machine learning for is tasks where we're going between things. Um, I do want to make a point here. I don't know if no, I don't make it, but it is possible that you have a hole in the middle of your distribution. So you have like data and they're on islands and you want to predict between the islands. Now it's not outside of the data that you did before. It's not outside of that range, but it's far enough from any data that you have. I like to refer to this as catastrophic interpolation. I don't know what people call this casually. I mean, it's just that there can be such holes that you think you're doing an interpolation problem. There's a big gap, and it's still like problematic because you don't have any data very close to it.
I always call it extrapolation.
Thank you. Into extrapolation. I like to call it
Intrapolation.
catastrophic interpolation because it makes it sound dramatic and fun, and I like that
Yeah.
because it is bad. I mean, so it's still bad if you're picking. Anytime you're trying to go somewhere where your data isn't, is bad, right? That's what's going on. So these are Gaussian process models. Okay, so here's an example. This is actually an example that I took from my PhD, so
Yeah, these
don't
are
make fun of
familiar.
it. Yeah, I mean, you can if you want, but this is what I love about Gaussian process models, because so much of math and whatnot is like so pie in the sky numbers, equations crap. Like you come to a solution and you're like, here's the final number. But what I got to end with all the time was, here's these beautiful plots and you can see how things go. So the game, again, as you remember, is drawing those lines. And so I'm drawing those lines, but I'm drawing them in 2D here. So I started with data here on the top left, and then I filled it in with a Gaussian process model, a very fancy one, by the way, but we're not going to get into that today. And then I got the uncertainty quantification associated with that, where I said, yeah, I know pretty well what's going on the East Coast in the United States, but in these mountainous regions where I have, you can see there's big lack of data there. Not very doing very good on those. So um, it just tells you exactly where you don't know. things. So questions about this. So this is temperature data. I've done this for dozens of other applications. I think I have more applications. Yeah. I have more applications of GPs on this other side. So um, there are lots of ways that people use GPs now, but most commonly they're in things like time series. So if you think like financial data over time, that happens a lot. Uh, Another place this happens a lot is like physics models, where I'm trying to combine different information with like simulations I've done. Um, the thing that is good about Gaussian process models, well, I'm jumping ahead. I'll talk about what they're good in like 2 slides. But here on the right is sort of the interpretation that the machine learning people like to use of Gaussian process models, that there's like infinite curves that you could draw between lines before you have the data. But then once you have the data, you know the lines have to go through all those data points, and you can draw uncertainties associated with them. So as opposed to like the linear regression sort of drawing the line approach that I took to telling you, this is another view of it that people find helpful to understand.
Mason in YouTube chat
Yep.
asked, would the mean be a scalar value then, or would it be a set of vector values?
That is a good question. So the examples that I showed you, this is setting the mean at one scalar value for all the values. But in this formula, it has an opportunity to be a vector. So it can be spatially varying, meaning that maybe I want to use linear regression in that mean, or maybe I have a physics model that I want to use in that mean, or maybe I just want the mean to be higher on the left and lower on the right. I can put any of that I want in the mean. And like for this one, it was a vector because it was this linear regression already. So that itself was a vector, but I could have made it a specific value. The mean matters a little bit in that if your data is really far away, it matters more. But if your data is relatively close, the mean will have very little contribution, which is why people ignore it a lot of the time. So yeah, there's you can do whatever your heart desires on that front, but what I was showing you was actually both, so good catching on to that. Other questions? I love the questions. You guys are so engaged. It's amazing. How can you find people online that are so interested in learning about such a complex math thing?
I got smart people watching me. That's how.
Yeah, you got a smart chat.
Keep
Okay,
pretending to
so
be
I'm gonna tell
smart,
you
chat.
right now, there's some data that is not as easily modeled by a GP, but looks like it's over space. So the example here is, I love this data set. It's very fun, by the way, is the UFO sightings across the United States. So here, each point means someone saw a UFO there. And the points themselves are the response. There's nothing about that that is like the thing that we're modeling. So like the other things, it was remember it was temperature across the US. So there were locations at which we had temperature. So the locations themselves are fixed and the temperature is the thing that we're trying to model. Here, the positions of people citing things is the variable itself. This is what we call a point process model, which is not really a GP, but you can sort of refactor it to make it a time series. And in that way, you could model it as a GP. But people come to me all the time with this sort of data where the position of something is the response. That is less a Gaussian process model. And I have done Gaussian process models on this Actually, there's a paper I published with a few people where they were dead set on doing this position thing as the GP, and we fit like two GPs, one to like X position and one to Y position. But like it's less obvious. That is not really what they're made for. It's more that there's a location and there's some value. Yeah, just to keep it in mind. But things over space, things, most variables that you think of might be able to be modeled by a Gaussian process model. Okay, so now I'm excited because we get to talk about the benefits and the drawbacks here. So I said this before, I'll say it again. Literally, if you can check the assumptions of these models, which you can do pretty easily. I've done a test for it. It's not super common to do actually, but anyway, um, you can't do any better in terms of these models. So if your assumptions hold, it's the best filling in of that model you can ever do. The problem is data is always messy, and to some degree or another, those are really hard to satisfy. This gives you uncertainty quantification. So remember, we don't just get the estimate of that temperature, we get how far off we think we are on that temperature. So should I trust that to the bank, or should I, make some other guess? So we can actually do some fancy things with modeling the covariance. I don't really want to talk about this very much today because I think it's too much for you all to fully understand, but you can do some fancy things with the covariance itself to control what happens to it. Small data is much better for these types of models. So like you only have a couple hundred points, it's going to kick the crap out of any other model that you can do. So that is well established in small data, that Gaussian process models are much better than other things like neural networks, et cetera, et cetera.
Which is a
There are
problem
data.
that is a problem that comes
Go
up
ahead.
in science a lot as well, right? This is,
Oh yeah.
you have worked with people where they are doing whatever, they're doing some other science, they're testing something, real world stuff or whatever, and they come to you and they're like, all right, what can you tell us about our data? We have 14 data points or whatever, right? They're like, what kind of
Yeah.
magic can you work? And a lot of other methods basically couldn't tell them anything valuable. And you like, it's still hard, maybe depending on what the different things you've walked in on. But it's a strength. It's an interesting strength of GP is that sometimes you don't get a lot of tests. Some scientific things you destroy the thing. You can only afford 5 things. You get that many data points. Like it's an interesting little tidbit that some of the stuff you've worked on has been kind of funny, where they were like, all right, we have one piece of data, now tell us how to build our project, or crazy
Yeah,
stuff.
well, Danny, California, actually, I've done a lot of material science with machine learning, actually, or with Gaussian process models. There's this one problem that we worked on that I published a paper on, and it was this testing strength of materials, and it's called a hole closure experiment. And basically, you take like a plate of the material that you want to test, and you cut a hole in the middle of it, and you have this machine that throws it against the wall really, really fast and hard, and it videotapes it while it's doing that. And as it hits the wall, the videotape watches how the hole in the center closes. And you can compare that to physics simulations that are doing that exact experiment to try and infer the exact properties of that material that you have.
That's
And I did that with a machine learning model or with a Gaussian process model, because we didn't have that many of those experiments. I mean, you only have a handful of runs. You have a handful of simulations, because those simulations are really expensive to do on these computers. You make a thing called a surrogate model, which actually saves you computation, and you're able to do this inference because of these Gaussian process models. And I wrote a paper to that regard.
my kind of science. Someone in a
Yeah.
lab somewhere was just like, yeah, throw it, and then the other scientist was
It's
like,
not a
hey,
person, but
what if we make a machine that throws it the same every time? And then someone was like, yeah. What if we put a hole in it and then we'll video it and we'll see how small the hole gets?
my favorite part
Science.
of this is that there are so many different experiments that they do different strength regimes of the material. So like the throwing it really hard with the hole closure, that's a really, really high pressure one. But there's another one where they put it in a cylinder and they throw that cylinder at the wall. And then there's like other ones too. Like they
Is
have
there
all
one
these
where a guy
series of
sits on it?
experiments. I hope so, but I don't know. Probably
That's really
anvils
funny.
drop on them or pianos or something.
They
I don't
have a
know.
coyote cut a rope that drops an anvil onto a sample of the material they're testing. Um, Also, Garrett Edwards has a compliment disguised as a question. Garrett says, I don't
Mm,
know if this has already been addressed, but are you a teacher? Because you're very good at making
I am
such a
not.
complex thing understandable for basic
Oh,
minds.
thank you. I appreciate that. It's so funny to me because people think that it's easy to talk about things simply, but you have to like to me it's like a whole thing. So you talk about things simply when you don't understand them because you don't understand any of the details. And then as you get more complicated things, you're in your understanding, you talk more complicated. And at some point you're very complicated and you talk so complicatedly that no one understands you. But you have to really come around and really understand what the back of the book solution is for things, the things that people need to understand to really understand and talk about it simply. So it's like this circle, and I've talked about this so many times to so many people, and I think everyone looks at me like you're crazy. But I'm like, no, to talk about something really simply and boil it down to the like details that people actually need to know, you need to know it so well. And I've been around Gaussian process models for more than a decade. This was what I worked on in my PhD. I led a project that worked on these when I worked at the lab. Obviously, we're researching them now. I think that they're really important and they're kind of like the unifying theory of statistics for me. And yeah, that's why I have this. And I probably need to put another jar thing in the jar for all that gushing about GPs, but I appreciate it. But it is very challenging. And I think a lot of academics struggle with this, and it's not their fault. It's just very hard to make things accessible. And I'm sure there are things that I'm not making fully accessible. But okay. So, drawbacks of GP. Sad, sad, sad. Okay, so they are really hard to compute. So doing this, having this whole matrix that's like so large you can't even hold it in memory is a problem. And defining these models can be really, really hard. You there's like some general forms of covariances that like people try and fit, but it can be like insanely complicated and people want to do them in general and you have to go through this thing called spectral domain to really define them well, which basically means you got to do some integrals into some spaces that don't exist just to make sure your matrix is going to be proper, blah blah blah, meaning you can't just write stuff down. You got to be really mathematically savvy to understand how these things work. um, so if you saw our this is a good plug. If you saw our coloring page this month, if you haven't colored it yet, I suggest you go to our website and grab it to color it. But it's a mountain range, okay? And so in my social post talking about that, it's meant to represent what I call non-convex optimization. And so basically what this means is I'm trying to estimate a model. I want to find the best model. That means I find the highest point. Now, the problem is that if I have a single mountain, I can just climb to the top and find the top of that mountain. That's easy. But if I have a lot of mountains, I don't even know which mountain to be on, right? There's so many mountains. I could be anywhere. Which one is going to lead me to the top? I got no ideas. That's called non-convex. So estimating parameters in GP models can be really complicated, and I'm not going to hold that away. I mean, honestly, machine learning models in general are super non-convex problems, and people have spent lifetimes trying to figure out how to estimate those parameters. So I'm at least doing like a much simpler problem. So in a neural network, you might estimate a million parameters. I'm talking about estimating on the order of like five. Okay, so it's a hard problem, but it's not as hard as machine learning people in their type of problem have been, other than this matrix. And of course, the assumptions are not always satisfied. You sometimes need different covariance models than you actually have, which sucks because they're very hard to define. But that's a math problem. We can work on math problems. Intangible black box problems, I don't feel like I can work on. I feel like I can work on these and try and define these things. And yes, it always leads back to regression. That is 100% true. This is regression. Everything in machine learning really is a regression to one way or another, I would define. Okay, again, my favorite quote here at the bottom. I told you I have made a social post about this because I think about this all the time. All models are wrong, but some are useful. Uh, GPs may be wrong. They're very useful, I argue. What are the eigenvalues and eigenstates of these matrices that represent the Gaussian process? Well, that really depends on what the covariance matrix is that you use to define. So we're going to talk about a few specific ones, I think, but generally they're positive because the eigenvalues, because it's a positive semi-definite matrix. I assume you know what that means if you're asking about eigenvalues.
I think that's a fair assumption.
You don't know what any of those things mean, Bob.
Sure, I do. And I didn't ask.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. We don't need to talk about this, but if you're trying to fit GPs yourself, um, you can just draw data that's like from that bell curve and you just hit it with a certain matrix, which is the Kolesky decomposition of that covariance matrix you want, and add the data, and you get data from a Gaussian process model. Everyone's very confused how to generate data from a GP. Very simple. This doesn't need to mean anything to you unless it does, then go for it. I don't even like the software that people use for GPs that much. It's just some basic linear algebra, so I usually just code it myself. So I think that that's true. Okay. I don't know if I should talk about this, but remember how we talked about things that are close, more important, things that far away, less important? Defining how much that is and how that changes is choosing your covariance function. And so there's a lot of ways that you can choose your covariance function. Here on the left, what people always use and what you'll hear if you hear people talk about this is an RBF, right? Radial basis function, which is also called a squared exponential in GP stuff. Dependent on your machine learning or statistics world, they call them different things, but it's the same function. And the important part is not what all these say, but that function goes really smoothly. So I assume things are like really changing slowly, sort of, in that world. You have lots of derivatives. It's very easy to compute, not a problem. But it has been shown over and over again by statisticians that the Matern covariance, which is here on the right, is the optimal solution. If you're going to actually go fit a function, um, that has this, I highly recommend you try a Matern covariance. It's not always possible. Things like PyTorch and functions that people fit this in don't like it because it's not a good model. This new parameter and the row parameter there are like very hard to separate sometimes, and it makes the computation kind of annoying, but it's worth it. It gives you so much more flexibility in that function. And so basically, you're going to choose this function based on what the data is telling you is the best one. And so I would prefer to have more flexibility, even if it's more like expensive and difficult to compute. But that's just me. So there are GPs. Uh, so there are packages. We will get to this more later, Starman, but actually, I might as well talk about it now. Let's talk about it now. So there's lots of ways you can estimate these. If you want to fit something simple, basic, scikit-learn and TensorFlow, but both do these already. PyGP is GPy, PyTorch. GPyTorch, sorry. They all do it. But obviously, if you have a big data set, I highly recommend you check out my MyGPs package, and I'll talk about that later. But that's the method that my team and I developed a couple years ago when I worked at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. But it's an open source package. It fits no matter how many data you have, but usually you need big data. So myself, I would either like fit it myself like really quickly using matrices, or I'd use something really stupid and simple like scikit-learn if I have small data. But if I have big data, I would use our package. Okay, so
Also, Mason Voykin says, I'm wondering if there are any opportunities for student to volunteer for real good. There are. We have volunteer groups. You should check out the website. You can get involved. There are regular meetings. There is a data set group as well as a machine learning group that are
mhm.
constantly having discussions, sometimes heated discussions in the Discord, talking about science and stuff. So yes, check that out. Sorry, continue.
Okay, so now I want to go back to pictures because we did too much math for a little while. Okay, so the models that we're talking about, they take like whatever thing you're in, and it just boils things down to how far apart two data points are. So remember that curve that I was fitting, there were a bunch of black dots. Now the only thing that the GP would know about those black dots necessarily in the covariance is how far away those two black dots are. So it doesn't matter if they're on the left or if they're on the right or like where they are in the United States. It just matters how far away they actually are from one another. That's how related they are. That gives you like a correlation like here on the left, where to that center point, let's say things are all related because they're the same distance apart. It gives you these circular type patterns, right? But that's not always realistic. Sometimes in some variables, it matters more than others. So you might get something called an anisotropic thing, which is this more, now that I'm seeing it, vagina looking thing here on the right. Um,
I was thinking
so
oval.
okay, oval looking thing here on the right. But the idea is that it's maybe stretched in one direction. It's not exactly equal in every dimension. Now, a good example of this is in climate, because the longitude maybe matters less than the latitude matters more. So we get these like bands of things. And so if I have information to the left or right of something in this plot, that's more important than having something vertically because it changes a lot vertically, but it does not change a lot horizontally. And so we want to take account for that in the model, and we can tell it to do that, but it gets really complicated really fast because if I have two dimensions here, I can see that, I can see the squishy, but if it's really high dimensions, I might not be able to see that, and that just might mean that it's more difficult to model this, and it can make it expensive. Yeah. I don't know. Should we stop here, or do we want to keep going? Do we want to know about big data? So this is sort of the fun part. I mean, I guess we might as well do this last bit. It gets really technical here really fast, but the way that data is, right? So let's say that I have temperature at a bunch of locations. So I have longitude and latitude, right? And I have it one temperature value. So that data, the input here, this X that I'm showing you, would be however many stations would be number N, and that would be each row would be a new station. And I would have longitude in one column and latitude in another column. Okay, so I would have two of those variables. It would fit on a two-dimensional plane if I was plotting it, and I would give and there could be I don't know how many values. So in that one specific value, we know there are two variables. Maybe there's a billion other variables that I have information about all those places. So now I don't just have two variables, I have a lot of variables. So there are two ways that data can be big, I'm saying. So either you can have a lot of stations or you can have a lot of information at a single station. Okay. And those are two ways that this model can be really hard. Now, I've addressed sort of the first one, which is the number of observations, the number of stations. We can deal with that relatively simply. And that's basically based on the reasoning I've been saying a million times, which is things that are really close, very important. Keep those in. Things really far away, not so important. Maybe we don't need all of those things. So that is what we're going to talk about with my GPs. But the other one is much more challenging, and that's what we're trying to address here at Real Good AI. Okay, so every time I mention this, that I have too much data, everyone's like, oh no, poor you, just like sample data and get over it, right? So, like, take some of your data and then get rid of the rest of it, and that's how you can fit in. Now, there are sort of two ways we could think about sampling data. Well, so, like, either I could do here on the left, where I'm like, I'll just take some random data and fit it on that, right? Uh, that's problem because as you can see, these points are way further away from one another. And remember, I told you things that are really close is really important. Things far away, not so important. We're missing all the really close information here on the left, which is bad because basically it means we're going to miss the important part of the model that we need to fit. Now, here on the right is also an issue because I'm just taking one small block of the sky. Can you imagine that both the points on the right that are colored are the same as the red points on the left? I guess maybe they're brown. I don't know. But you don't get to cover the whole space. So if something happens where there's like a different thing going on in this one area than there is everywhere else, you're gonna get really wrong answers essentially. So just because you're looking at one tiny piece doesn't mean you understand the whole space. So my GP sort of combines these two ideas in a smart way that um, doesn't suffer from either of these problems. Okay, so I get to show it off now. Finally, the big hurrah, my GP is the thing I developed. The idea is that we're going to train it, like, let's say, like a machine learning model. So there is a statistically correct way to train these models. It's horribly expensive. I didn't really focus on this today, but you do something called maximum likelihood estimation, which means that function that we sort of ignored because it had too much math in it, we would have to compute that a bunch of times. And so many times that it's like at nauseum, like, to estimate those. It's like it's expensive to even estimate it once, so that's too expensive. So estimating it the proper way is too expensive. Let's take a machine learning approach and instead make a loss function of some sort of leave one out function, very machine learning like, and we'll take that from them. But even though we don't have the machine learning, even though we're training the parameters like a machine learning model, we're going to keep that original model that comes with that uncertainty quantification. Now, we might be off a little bit, but it's not terrible. You might be off a little bit, but I'd rather do that than spend all my computation doing it. The other thing we do that's smart is we pick some points across the space. So if you look here, usually to predict at the star point, using a Gaussian process model, I would use all the data to some degree or another, right? We're going to say, okay, well, if I'm predicting at star point, I only want to use the nearest neighbor, so the data within uh, some region around them. And that's what I'm going to use. Now we're going to do this at random points across the domain. So both we're going to randomly select points, but then we're going to use only their nearest neighbors to do their predictions. So both we're getting the whole space, but we're also using all the important points to those things. And this is kind of, it's absurdly simple actually, but I can't believe no one really did this in the literature. Here's like a quick workflow. We don't need to look at that. But the idea here is here on the right, that we made this plot, and this was why we got funded. Essentially, all these other points on this graph are all the other possible GP approximation methods for this specific problem. And the idea is that on the bottom here is time. So we want the time to computation to be low. So we want to be left, and the the axis here on the top is RMSE, which is your error. So you want to be low. You want to be in this bottom left corner. As you can see, my GPs can either be the most accurate or the fastest method, dependent on choosing how many neighbors and some technical things. But actually, we found some way to move this entire thing down. So the point being, you can get the fastest and most accurate estimate of these sort of models using our method, which was kind of a miracle because this is like 40 years of literature review, and I'm doing something very simple here, but it works. Now, I think all of you have noticed that my GP is has my name in it. The MUI is Muyskens. But actually, the GPS also were my collaborators on this. So G is Dr. Gomiri, which you know who was on our team. P is Dr. Min Priest, also was on our team, and S was Dr. Michael Schneider. And so we were the group that did this, and it just happened to work out that their initials were GPs, which was amazing. But that's where the name comes from. People find that interesting, and they hated that I named it that, but so it goes. So that's the method, and it is kind of magic that it fits faster and more accurate. So I feel like very satisfied that this problem of number of observations is relatively solved. And feel free, if you are a data inclined person, to use our MyGPs package. There's been so many neural network converts that we've gotten who have, like, once they use it, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so fast, it's so easy, it gives me such good solutions in like very no amount of time. And so it is kind of crazy to see that transformation, and that always makes me smile. So please feel free to try it.
So this is I will field this one. You might want to say something. Kaleidosouls said I like am curious how GPs differ in money slash energy expenses from LLMs. This is one of the big the actual answer to this is theoretical, right? We don't actually know yet because this the stream has ended.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna try and find that.
Sure. Um, this is we're still not we Mandy and team are still doing the research. It's still being worked on, but these are run on a laptop. All of these things that Mandy, this research that we're doing, is running on MacBooks. This is not like using supercomputers or data centers or anything like that. So it is theoretically much more efficient and both energy efficient and hardware efficient. But also, it's you can't just the current approach that a lot of the AI companies are using is like get every single scrap of data that you can, chuck it all in that bad boy, and hope that it gives you the better answers than the last one you did. This approach really is going to take more like research and development. It's going to have to be more carefully considered, and you're going to have to actually build the models to like be more thoughtful and not just use every scrap of data in the known universe to try and train it, right? Oh, you found your thing.
So yes, I found the thing. So Mark had this, and he pointed at them and gestured at them and had no idea what they meant. I think I didn't give him enough context, but the plot I really want you to look at is here on the right. And so it doesn't matter what the problem was that we were working on. It's a really cool function, but it's a really cool project. But the important thing here is that this yellow one is a CNN, which is the most close neural network we have here to what's going on in an LLM, more or less. I mean, they're not the same kind of neural network, but in terms of computation time, a CNN is closer than any of the rest of these models. And as you can see, as the training data size gets bigger, it goes to the moon, right? But our GP model, because of the way that we have it implemented, it's like relatively flat and absurdly lower, getting us like almost the exact same answer for a much, much lower computation. And so in this case, I think it was like 97% reduction or something, if I'm remembering right. But the idea is that the bigger the data is, the bigger that gap should be. in theory, right? Dependent on how we're training the model. Because we're throwing away far away data, we're just using close data in some ways. It really, really makes it a huge difference. And so we can either use way less data. And so here on the left, if you're looking at small data cases, the red one is our Gaussian process model. It does so much better in terms of computing than any other option. But if you're looking at big data, we're more efficient than the alternative. So that's the hope. I know it sounds like a dream, and it really is, but there's a lot of steps between where we're at now and with what we need to get to make that possible. But that is 100% the idea, is to not just cut it by some factors, it's to decimate it and have us use way less data.
Yep. Whatever you're doing is absolutely ruining Discord.
Sorry, I fixed it. Is it back?
No, it just keeps, every time you do it, it keeps changing where your face is, but it's
Oh,
fine.
sorry. I'm just switching to the chat. Don't tell anyone I said that. I shouldn't have said that. Sorry. But the regular version is fantastic, and I would urge you to work on it. I just haven't used the Jax implementation because I think the problem was that Jax changed its UI at some point while we were developing it, and it made it bad. So I don't remember, but I would focus on the main implementation.
Kaleidosol says, I think it's clicking. I'm evolving. So the difference is current LLMs are focusing on big data and looking at too much, and GPs would look at more specific, smaller data. So it's wasting less time and using less data.
Essentially, that's the hope. But the problem is that we need to expand our models to be more flexible so that we have more options for models. And also we need to be able to use the sparsity smartly. So we need to use MyGPs or something equivalent that will make it work. Hello, Raiders. Welcome.
Oh, what's up, Raiders? Immersion Diversion, thank you for the raid. What's up, everybody? You've stepped into science land. Math land, statistics land, whatever. You're
Okay,
here
so
now.
the last thing that I'll talk about is the curse of dimensionality. I've talked about this a little bit in social media, but the what you're seeing here is for different dimensions. So remember, if we had latitude and longitude, that's two dimensions. But if we have other variables that affect where things are or how things are, that means that everything in that space is like that space is getting bigger, right? So like things can be further away the more variables you have. Things are more on their own. And basically what I'm showing here is pretty much regardless of how many observations you take in a space, it's sort of things are how far away that they are uh in those dimensions. So meaning I can't just sample so much data that I have data that is closer than that would help me out modeling my thing, right? So I told you before, if there are big gaps, that's bad. So here, the more dimensions you have, the more gaps you have. You have almost entirely gaps, right? And so this is a problem, and we want to be able to overcome it. And that's the sort of model that we're working on right now, because in these high dimensions, things are just so far apart. We're like, oh no, the Gaussian process models don't work anymore because they're just predicting the mean because everything is so far apart. You understand why that would be the case? Because there's nothing close to it, so it's just saying that's the mean then because everything is so far away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I told you would happen. This just happens when you have really high dimensions. But we want to overcome that. And so basically what I have this idea of doing, it's very early. This is the model I've been working on lately at Real Good though, is to define these categories of the variables. So maybe I have a thousand variables, but maybe only a handful of them are really important. Think about my value, like I'm trying to define what a llama is, right? There are so many ways I could describe that llama and things about that llama that may or may not be helpful to defining whether that is or is not a llama, right? So some variables might be really important and I need to model them really complicatedly. Some might be important to some degree, and some might not be important at all. And I really want to respect that each of these variables have their own importance. And so my idea is to build essentially what comes to a custom distance function that is no longer based just on how far things are away, but also how important it is to the model, and defining that importance by letting these variables just like be in these categories of importance when they're modeling. Now that adds a lot of parameters to what I'm trying to estimate, but I have a lot of hope that this will solve some of our problems and get us halfway through, halfway between neural networks and GPs without losing the interpretability, because I will still be able to trace things back. I just will have something more flexible for the variables that really matter. And that's all I have going on. Those are the things about GPs. I'm happy to answer more questions.
Uh, Willow Whiteheart says currently taking a stats class. Would that be considered clustering data in order to narrow down ideas?
So typically when you cluster data, I mean, it depends on what you're thinking about, but when I think of clustering data, I think of clustering like the locations of things. So so that would be like clustering in n. I'm talking about this in assigning the variables, the columns themselves, to be in different values. So in that regard, I guess maybe it's like a it would not, you could not just apply k-means or anything, if that's what you mean. Typically that would be a different kind of clustering, but it is an assignment of class to variables. Thank you for listening, chat. I can't believe there's still 100 of you all sitting here listening to me talk about math. I've been putting this off because I thought that you all didn't want to hear this, but I was very wrong. Many questions.
I don't know what this
Happy to answer
question
more too.
means, but Urtane
Yeah,
says, I wonder if this involves ON stuff?
no.
It's like, okay, you know what that means?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. O notation, big O notation is on the order of whatever it is, right? So if
Oh.
I have O observation or ON notation, that basically means whenever I want a solution, I have to do number of observation, number of computations, right? So ON is great because it would be like this line. So like as I add more information, it gets exactly linearly harder to solve that problem. ON is great. You get ON, you're like, yes, I can go home. No. Originally Gaussian process models are ON cubed. They're ON squared in memory, but they're ON cubed in terms of computation, which is just absurdly expensive, which is to the moon hockey stick, right? So that's like what we observed with the CNN also, right? So it's like as there gets more data, it gets really hard to solve that problem. Yeah. So cubed is awful, right? But like the version that we did, the MyGP is bit, the most expensive part of doing that model is you do a nearest neighbor calculation, and we do it approximately using HNSW. Okay, way too many applications, but way too much detail. But that's n log n, I believe. So I think that is, but you only have to do that once. And so when you repeatedly do things, it's much cheaper. So. Eh, that is the most expensive part, but just to give you context, like the problem that I like fitting my gps on, that we like really made it for, is called like this heat and data problem, but it's basically like satellite imagery where there's a picture of a satellite, like the temperature of the land from a satellite looking down, and there's some clouds covering some pieces of it, and you have to try and fill in what was behind the clouds at that moment we took the picture. Um, and the idea is that that data set has like 100,000 training and 50,000 testing data points, and you can't fit that on your laptop. Even doing it like approximately, it takes forever. We got it down to where it took seconds on a laptop still. And just to give you context, I think we fit the biggest GP ever. I'm not 100% sure. Oh no, can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, my headphones are dying. Um, I might have to switch in a minute. But at the end of our project, we fit a GP that was on 1 billion observations on a supercomputer. Okay. But but that's amazing.
Um, so this is kind of a philosophical question, and I have an opinion on it. But Kaleidosouls asked, so I'm not into data, but I did do linguistics. Do GPs have an understanding of things unlike current LLMs, like understanding language structure? Uh, the complete answer to that is still no,
No.
right?
Well, there's first of all, I don't actually think there are GP LLMs. Like, there's no such thing that
Yeah,
exists because they are
that is
too
theoretical.
complicated at this
That may
moment. Like,
exist.
but the idea is that it could tell you that I got this from here, right? So I think the next answer should be blue because of these other things said blue after they said the, right?
Hmm.
So in theory, it's traceable. Whether that's understandable, I mean, still, I don't think there's any sense of real cognition coming from AI unless we actually rewrite the script on how things are evolved. So in one way, you know, this could help LLMs, right? But I don't think it's the full picture of helping LLMs. I have this crazy idea. Um, of doing models, and I know it's pretty crazy because it's not fully justified or fully worked out, because the types of models I see in my head are like physics models, right? Because that's what I'm used to working on. I work on data problems. I don't usually work on text. But I have this concept that I think that LLMs are trying to do too much to solve one problem. So I think meaning is one thing and sentence structure is another. And so I really think they should be broken down into multiple models somehow. And I don't have the exact answer book on how that should be done. We need to do more research into understanding this. But that the content model should generally be one thing, and understanding like communication and English or like whatever language you're speaking in should be another. And so I think that the solution is much more complicated than just throwing it in a GP rather than uh throwing it in a neural network, although that would be a start, because in some, like in the art world, that would solve so many of the problems, if that were to work. But in terms of LLMs, I think that there's a lot more wrong with them than just the underlying model, to be honest. Also in
Sarah,
humans interacting with them.
yeah. Sarah M asks, and we did answer this, so I'm just going to give you a quick re-answer. Is there a quantifiable difference in environmental resource consumption of the use of GP models instead of neural networks when applied to current chatbots, other AI systems? There are no LLMs powered by GPs currently. Like, this is all stuff that exists in theory. This is sort of what we're working on, what the organization Real Good is working on. Kind of like, but yes, theoretically, in terms of how much more efficient GPs are in like their current implementations and what Mandy has been able to do with them, yes, they would be much more efficient. They would be much more energy efficient and require less resources. But like, that is purely theory. We don't have. There's no actual testing that can tell you how much the difference is, or that it like what it is. Another question. Cool Cookie asks, I probably have a very dumb question, but I'm going to ask anyway. What makes it expensive? Is it like paying to run computers to process the information, or like is the expense the electricity and the water? I think the answer to that question is yes. It's kind of all of it. It's expensive to pay for the electricity and the water that you need to run data centers. It's expensive to buy all the hardware that you need to put in the data centers. Um, it's all. There's not any specific part of it that I is the most expensive that I'm aware of. It just is very
Most of
expensive.
the time, when I say expensive, though, I mean computationally expensive, meaning that something, I don't mean like money expensive. I mean like burning computing resources expensive. That is a shorthand that I use a lot.
Mm. Uh.
My face is cut off a lot on your screen.
I just
Thank you.
fixed it. That's what I'm saying. Every time you switch your thing, it ruins that, and I have to readjust it. I
Sorry.
don't know why Discord is doing that. Christopher Rowland says, I'm working while listening, but I'm developing my own stock market ML. This has been very informative, or this was very insightful. Interesting. Thanks for coming.
Good
Um,
luck. It's difficult because of the extrapolation problem we talked about, but best to you.
Mason Voikin on YouTube says, can you explain your early dimensionality model? They are the person who was asking about volunteering, so they seem to be a student
My early
who.
dimensionality model. I mean, I sort of explained it
Mm,
in that I want to take the variables and assign them into classes of how complicated we want to model them. And by existing in different classes, that will change that distance function to, instead of being the same thing, be probably sparsified and more likely focused on the variables that we actually care about. It's theoretic too. I need more time. Research takes a long time.
yeah, well, and this is
That
why
my
Real Good
GP's
needs
model,
to.
we
Oh, go
we
ahead.
spent 5 years, I think, developing it approximately. So, if that gives you context.
This is why Real Good as an organization is so important. Science is slow and difficult, and as far as we can tell, no one is working on this. But there's a lot of development on GPs that can be done, and that if it all pans out, will lead to an entirely different approach to how AI implementations using GPs might exist in the future. But like, this work has to happen, or no one's ever going to do that. You can't just jump from where we are to now we have ChatGPT powered by Gaussian process or whatever. There's a lot of
Right.
steps.
And we have other things that we have going on at the same time too, right? Like this might take 5 years to come to something fruition in terms of the GP modeling, but we have other like educational and outreach things that we have going on constantly. I mean, this is one of them. This information has not been openly shared like this. And so this is information that now the whole internet can have, which is great. And I'm very happy about. But I'm happy to answer any questions about math or things that like. The point being, this is not the only thing Real Good AI is working on, but this is some of the more technical research.
This is the part where Mandy demonstrates that she's a genius to you.
I mean, that's not the point. The point is that I've spent a lot of time studying. People always look at people with like PhDs or whatever and are like, oh my gosh, they're geniuses. But really, it's just we spent so much time focusing on our one thing, right? Maybe you can talk about this about like wow or whatever your interests are. I can talk about this because this is my interest.
I think the answer is going to disappoint you. Powon on air says the computational expense in turn results to monetary expense. Can you maybe expound on it? Oh, we don't have any. Honestly, I don't know if there is any particularly accurate information on that, other than to say every moment a computer processor is running, it's burning electricity and generating heat. Electricity costs money to generate, heat costs money and resources to dissipate. You can't let heat build up in computers or they break themselves. I don't know the numbers, and there are some like papers and some articles out there that purport to have run estimations on how much water or how much electricity, but they're all based on estimates, and as far as I can tell, they're all skewed one way or the other because the person writing the article either is very in favor or very not in favor of whatever company, whatever AI tool, whatever thing. Like it's all very, there's not a very accurate like spreadsheet of numbers on how much does it cost to train an LLM like ChatGPT. They the answer is very vague, but more power, more heat, more monies is the answer that I can give you.
And just to that end, we only have laptops here, real good AI. So it's whatever you're running your games on is more powerful probably than what we're computing on to
Yeah.
do our research. So
Have you talked to Blenheim Chalcott? If not, you should. I can't tell if that's a meme or a joke or a real thing, but I'm not sure. I don't think. I think the answer is no. I don't know. Who is that? Do you think transformer architecture is the limitation or the post processing RLHF plus chaining on our way to AGI?
I personally, this is my personal opinion, don't think AGI is a thing. I think we're all fooling ourselves into understanding pattern recognition. I don't really think there is such a thing as AGI, although things can be helpful as tools, especially with the neural network architectures, the way that you're talking about them. I don't know if you've ever done a reinforcement learning problem otherwise, but uh, the hard part of the problem is always how you define it and how you define the rewards along the way, and that's not something that's simply fixed. So both of those things, I mean, I just don't think AGI is going to exist even with our methodology. The point is not AGI, the point is tracking your machine learning and understanding the machine learning. And so in either case, I don't think AGI is what I'm heading towards. I'm heading towards tools that are useful for humans.
Rainy Berry. I have another disappointing answer for you, probably. Rainy Berry asks, some companies are using AI to support organizational search functions, so not generative AI necessarily. Is that as bad resource wise as generative AI? I am not an expert on these, but all of those things that work like that are just different implementations of LLMs. I'm pretty sure, right? If it's parsing language, it's some kind of LLM. If it's an LLM, it's probably similar in type to the ones that you can access as chatbots publicly. I do not
I mean, not
know.
necessarily. Like Google existed for lots of years doing AI and how they were ranking things in their search functions prior to LLMs,
Sure.
but it is likely what Bob is saying in
the
this
the
day and
current
age.
trend makes it pretty likely that those tools that are very popular and businesses are rushing to implement very likely include LLMs, which means that they are very similar in terms of resource consumption, data usage, all of those things that concerns people have about AI tools possibly apply to those, but without knowing like answering for a specific one and looking into it, I can't really tell you. But like that's kind of how everyone's doing it now. That's the hot thing, right? It's not. It's not. That's the new season. Everyone's getting AI. Everyone's getting chatbots.
Yeah, well, and just for the record, anything that's promising you safer AI is lying to you at this point. Um, they say a lot of the same words that we say, but until they fix the internals of the black box of the neural network, they're just putting filters on things. It's not actually solving the problems. There are no such satisfactory results that can actually fix it at this point. So I just want you to know that if someone is telling you that their AI is safe or something in some other way, they're probably just putting a hat on ChatGPT itself. So more than likely.
I saw a video a company did that gave its AI a vending machine to run. they gave it. They added a manager to help after it emailed the FBI about fraud. Was that the same one where a company set up a vending machine to be run by AI, and it resulted in the AI quickly figuring out that one product was the thing it sold the most of, and all it did was stock that one product in every slot on the vending machine, and became and then jacked the price up because it had the monopoly. I remember seeing multiple different stories about AI managed vending machines doing really hilariously terrible things. Um, but yeah, that's pretty funny. What's the difference between ethical and safe AI? Oh,
Terminology.
yeah, I mean, I think that's more of a difference in a marketing speak kind of way than in a meaningful way for the sort of scientific approach that we're taking. If a company is marketing you ethical AI, they are probably making claims about how they trained their model, where they get their data from, things about like the back end of it. If a company is marketing safe AI, they are potentially marketing it as like this is safe for children, or this is safe because it won't tell you how to make your own weapons or something. Like it's, but not like technically, like Mandy said, none of that actually means anything. Those would work exactly the same as other similar AI tools. The company just has some sort of wrapper or filter or human
Right.
moderated
Well,
like layer
and it's
where it's
possible
just go
the
ahead.
word ethical also describes things like human biases, and there's like whole fields of AI that are related to like amplifying biases, and like, you know, the image generator that labels the exact same person, if they're a white person or a black person, very differently in bad ways, et cetera, et cetera. And so oftentimes that can also be included in ethical. These words, I mean, that's sort of the thing in current AI space. Words don't mean anything. They mean whatever the marketing team wants them to mean for whatever thing it is. Yeah, and a lot of the safe AIs, they might also just not be saving your searches. That just might be the gag, but that doesn't mean it's safe in terms of usage or in terms of them training it or the algorithms or anything. So um, it means whatever people want it to mean.
Mason says, "Do you have an idea as to why AGIs have become such a hot topic, especially if there's a doubt as to whether proper AGIs exist?" I don't think that's new. I think scientists have been hunting
Science
after creating
fiction.
AGIs since
Yeah.
computers have existed as a concept. I think humanity in general has a very persistent sort of God complex, and everyone is fascinated and drawn to the notion of creating this new life form or like whatever. Like it's a thing that people are drawn to because of whatever their motivations are. I don't think it's new at all. People have been trying to work in this direction and work towards AGIs for a long, long time. But that's my opinion. I'm by no means an expert on it. White Arrows just wants to say thank you. AI is not going
Oh,
away,
thank you.
and we need folks like you to help humans adapt to it. Dang Skippy, it's not going anywhere. And if it's not going anywhere, it might as well not suck so much.
It would be nice.
What do you think of AI being used in video games for voice acting? Theoretically, it may be possible for an NPC to have unlimited dialogue based on what the player asks it or the actions they take. One, the implementations of that I've seen demoed have been hilarious, and hilarious bad, not hilarious good. Two, the implementation of AI generated voices right now, as far as I understand it, we have talked to some officers from NAVA, North American Voice Actors Association, I think. There isn't currently like an ethically sourced model for generating a voice. There are voice actors who use their own voice to make their own model of their own voice for their own projects, and like that's one thing. But even the underlying tool that they use to do that is built on basically stolen samples of people's voices. It's not licensed or credited. Voice actors' work was just sort of taken and put in. So as far as I understand, I don't know if that's changed, but I don't think generative AI for voice acting for NPCs in game, I don't think that's in a good place, either in what it can produce or in where it's coming from and how it's being generated. But that's not going to stop companies from rushing to try and wedge that in their games, I would assume. For the current state of the commercial AI AGI RAG, what's RAG?
Brag. Yeah.
RAG. What's your opinion on the future sustainability of it, with funding and investments backed up by big tech corps to fall back or withhold bursting of the bubble? I mean,
Well, it's kind of interesting
that's a
because
big question.
companies in this right now, right? They're not producing what they're saying they are, and everyone's like, yeah, more money. So I don't know. I'm not an economist, so I can't tell you what's going on, but there will be another AI winter where people are skeptical of all this. I don't know if that's a bubble or what, because it depends on how you define that in terms of economics, which I don't. I don't report to know, like, but in terms of, I'm hoping people will turn to methods like this and try and pick the better routes toward future. But
Um, Ben Bacon Bits says, I work with long-winded psych studies. Is having AI summarize them safe? I wouldn't recommend it. If you're interested in getting maybe the gist of something and like maybe kind of understanding what's in it, probably, and you're not too worried about the details, probably an AI summary will be kind of close enough. But if you actually want to make sure it's factually correct information, if you're trying to pull from a paper to like cite it or something, don't don't rely on that. AI summaries and
but
paper
like
might,
AI
you know.
transcripts using AI generated uh what's the word, subtitles, things that make things just like more accessible like that but don't actually change the content, those are way less risky in terms of things. Like if you're relying on it to tell you true information, but like if I say purple and it said people, you would still generally understand the sentence that I was saying, right? But uh things like that are lower risk. So
Well, we can hang out and keep doing questions, but
it is 4 o'clock.
yeah, we hit
I
time.
talked for like 2 hours, chat. That's a lot of talking.
You have a lot of
Sorry.
stuff to say.
I could talk about GPs for like years. There are many things that we glossed over that I'm sure other people would like to know.
We'll have to do this
But
again.
maybe.
Well, should we go ahead and wrap up?
Sure. Can you still hear me?
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
our internet.
switching out one earphone at a time so
Oh,
that they can
haha.
charge. Is open.
Well, chat. Thanks so much for hanging out and listening to. Oh, that's not the correct one. Listening to the lecture on Gaussian processes. I guess I'll just stay on this seat so you can see Mandy's face. Make sure that you follow Real Good AI. If this interested you even slightly, this is part of the mission that Real Good AI is pursuing. This is part of the scientific research stuff. There are many other things that we're working on, but there's also volunteer groups. If you're interested in this and you know things about math, you could volunteer to participate in the machine learning group or the dataset group. If you are a streamer, content creator, there's a group of those sorts of people that we are consulting. If you are an educator or a communications person, there is a group focused on that and getting input from those types. I know that I'm forgetting something. What am I forgetting? There's another group, isn't there? I'm losing my mind. I should know this.
I was not listening.
Dataset, machine learning, streamers, communications, education, other. Also, anyway, if you want to volunteer, there's volunteer groups.
Art.
AI
Art
and
and
art.
AI.
Oh, art.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're an artist, we are trying to commission artists for real human art. Also, there's a newsletter. Also, there's social media, which mainly features Mandy. So if you like hearing Mandy talk, highly recommend the socials. She does a lot of the posts out there, and it's real fun. Also, we stream every week. Usually it's on Thursday. Like I said in the opening, sorry it's on Wednesday. That's very unusual. We almost always stream on Thursdays. We frequently have guests, including other scientists, including people from the nonprofit sector, including streamers and friends. Make sure you're following all of the things. Were you going to say something, Mandy?
Yeah, I just was, oh man, I lost it. Wow. Well, I talked for too long about math. My brain got scrambled. I was gonna advertise something. Oh,
Coloring
the
page?
socials. Bob was talking about socials. We need to get to 10,000 followers on each of the platforms so that we can monetize it, so that your watching will go towards the mission itself. And so we're like at like 4,000 on both Instagram and Twitch, or TikTok, I think. Anyway, if you don't mind going to those places and following us, that really helps us out, so that both we get boosted in the algorithm, but also we are able to monetize that at some point in the future here. That's our goal here in this upcoming year, is to get those channels monetized so that they're working towards the mission as opposed to just education, which we're happy to do as well. But
And Cookie, if you couldn't hear what we were saying because an ad ran for some reason, go to realgoodai.org/volunteer for more information about volunteering, or realgoodai.org in general. All of the stuff that we are promoting is on the website, listed and or linked on the website. That's going to be the end of the stream. Thank you so much for hanging out, and make sure you follow and have notifications on so that next Thursday when we go live, you'll see it and you can come and watch whatever fascinating stuff we're going to talk about then. We're out of here. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Thank
Have a
you
good
for
rest of your
coming.
week. Bye, everybody.
bye, thank you.